So Your Monster is the most recent film starring Melissa Barrera, who has quietly made quite a career for herself in horror between the Scream franchise and more recently Abigail. When this movie came out, it was marketed as a horror romantic comedy, which let me just say, I do not agree with that marketing, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, I think this movie is quite good.
What's up?
So as I just said, Your Monster stars Melissa Barrera playing Laura, and it tells the story of this girl who just cannot catch a break. Absolutely down on her luck, hit rock bottom. Laura has just been diagnosed with cancer. She's been dumped by her boyfriend at 5 years. She has to have surgery. It's an easy character to sympathize with. But when she's finally of health, she goes home, she's sulking and grieving and binge eating, doing what we all do whenever you get over a breakup. And one day she stumbles upon a monster in her closet, leading to an unexpected connection and quite a fun little rom-com, if I have to say. Pleasantly surprised. You know, I am a sucker for this type of quirky rom-com when you throw in some spooky elements. But yeah, I think this is a fun little movie you can watch around holiday season if your girl wants you to throw in a rom-com. This is also kind of a tricky movie to review because I just described what the film's about, and that's what it is about, but it's kind of also 3 movies in one. You have this romantic comedy angle going on between Laura and the monster, which is pretty fun, and then you have another angle going on between Laura and her ex, and then you have a third angle which is just full-blown musical going on. It's very highbrow art, so it's 3 movies in one, and some parts work better than others, but overall I think it does come together to make a pretty unique and memorable experience. In fact, I don't really know if I've ever seen another movie like this. I heard a lot of people compare this to Lisa Frankenstein, and I don't necessarily agree with that, even though I know where they're coming from. It's the same thing people do with Edward Scissorhands. Whenever you have a romantic comedy with that weird, quirky, spooky angle to it, where there's like a mythical being or there's a creature or something who's in love with a girl, this film felt a lot different tonally than Lisa Frankenstein. Because to me, Lisa Frankenstein played out a lot more like a Tim Burton film. The aesthetic of it all, how colorful it was, it just felt very Halloween-y. This movie doesn't really feel like that. It feels a lot more like a theater play, very high art. And that's not a bad thing, it's just a difference in the way it's filmed. So know that going into it. If you're hearing people say it's like Lisa Frankenstein, it's like Edward Scissorhands, I don't necessarily agree with that. But anyways, you have Laura and this monster in a closet who start to form this unlikely bond over life and art. And they talk about Laura's relationship with her ex and how he gave her part in the play away. And right off the bat, that is easily where this movie's at its best and it's the most fun. When you have Laura and the monster on screen together, the two of them, the guy who's playing the monster and Melissa Barrera, have awesome chemistry in these roles. I thought the comedy hit a lot of the time, not all of it, but the majority of it did make my theater laugh.
Look! From this angle, I can see your back and your face simultaneously. That's how much I'm looking at you.
I'm a mess!
No, you're not!
I'm a disaster!
Oh.
The two of them just have such a witty and lighthearted connection between the two that's very easy to root for, even though the whole thing is fairly predictable if you've ever seen a single romantic comedy in your life. And that's another thing I need to point out. How much you enjoy this film probably depends on that immediately. If the comedy works for you, you'll probably enjoy this film. If the comedy does not land with you, you'll probably hate this film. So with that being said, I can easily see this becoming a cult classic to some people, and I can see other people just absolutely despising this and giving it 1 star, probably no in between. But then you have the other angle of what's going on. You have Laura and her ex who's running this play she's trying to audition for. And to me, at least, that was paced a little bit clunky because you keep bouncing back and forth between the monster and Laura and then going to the audition. And there's really no continuity to it because you're rooting for the monster and her to kind of end up together and just share that bond. And then she's still grieving over the loss of this guy who's clearly a douchebag. It's just one of those angles in a romantic comedy that's kind of hard to get into because you can so clearly see this guy's the bad guy, that guy's the good guy, which is kind of a funny thing to say when you have a monster as one of the subjects in the film, which goes to show how good the writing in this movie is, I believe. When you can get the audience to be on board with a relationship between a character and a monster, that tells me the writing's pretty good. And it's also kind of interesting, the human nature of it all, that we can get empathetic and root for these characters that aren't even believable whatsoever. And then, as I said a couple of minutes ago, the last section of this film is that musical angle, and I have just never been a musical guy. I only have liked about 2 or 3 musicals ever in my life. So what you get out of this movie's final act is probably going to completely depend on what you think of musicals, if the musical bits work for you. Because the final third of this movie is basically a pure musical. It is about 5 different songs done in rotation. So I can totally see some people really buying into the first half or 2/3 of this film, getting to the ending and going, what the fuck did I sign up for? Why is it a musical all of a sudden? But surprisingly to me, I actually didn't mind the musical bits in this movie. I actually enjoyed them quite a bit, and I almost never say that. So I think if Melissa Barrera was actually singing these songs, she is incredibly talented. I did not know she had that in her, because there are a couple of songs and a couple of notes she has to hit and just some of the cadence she has to have that is very impressive. I didn't think she was capable. So again, I got to call it out. That is a crazy impressive performance if that was was actually her. But going back to my favorite part of this, when you have the monster and Laura hanging out, Tommy Dewey as the monster and Melissa Barrera, both awesome as the two leads in this. Melissa Barrera does so much, as I've already said a couple of times. She sings in this, she acts, she's kind of over the top, but it's for comedic value, but I still think she's just great in this role. Great to see her in something that's not pure horror. It's nice to see her show a little bit more range. If she left horror and went right to this genre movie, she would blend right in and she'd continuously get roles, no doubt in my mind. But Tommy Dewey might even steal the show from her. That's how good he is as this monster. I've never heard of this guy in my life. I've never seen another role with him, but he's very charismatic as this monster, the way he tells his jokes. He is over the top at points, but it's probably due to writing. He never goes so over the top, it feels like his monster's just a cartoon. And he finds a way of being comedic while also retaining some of the fear that would come from a monster. I just thought the guy really nailed this performance. I really have nothing to compare it to, but I enjoyed every moment of screen time this guy was on screen. I thought he was the best part of this movie. But if I had to talk about a couple of things I disliked about this, I think it is paced kind of poorly in the middle. There's about 10 to 15 minutes I think you could shave off. There's really nothing major that comes to mind that I think just immediately needs to get cut out, but I like a swift 90, okay? We were at an hour and 45. Let's cut it down to 90. Minor complaint, I know, but I felt it a little bit in the dead center of this. I thought there was a scene or two you probably could have hacked. But other than that, I really don't have any negatives besides the fact that this is kind of a musical, and I'm just not really a musical guy. You know, I did enjoy this one for what it was trying to do, but it's just not my favorite genre movie, so it's really one of the only negatives I have. Didn't take away from my experience. I enjoyed this film, but yeah, I would always rather not watch a musical. It's just a preferential thing. But overall, guys, based on what I heard, I was pleasantly surprised I liked this film as much as I did. I thought this movie was incredibly well acted. I thought it was very unique, especially when it comes to rom-coms. It was just a very watchable, fun, quirky little romantic comedy I could see revisiting during the spooky season, you know? Some good musical bits. You have one or two scares. I definitely don't agree with that horror element, but I definitely think it's a fun little watchable movie I recommend you check out if you have any interest. I definitely think you could do worse. So if you've heard of or seen this, comment down below or let me know what your favorite kind of offbeat rom-com is. As always, if you haven't subscribed, join me down below, but that's all I got in this video. Peace!